In ELA today, we're going to start by finding our seesaw task. So listening ears for what you need to find. Please click on activities, assign to class folder, and red ELA. Our lesson is called Characteristics of Climate Regions. Yesterday, we started by talking about what is climate. We're going to watch that video again today to refresh our minds. What is climate and how is it different from weather? We're going to go ahead and start with that video. We're going to re-watch it. I want students focusing their attention so we are ready for today's lesson.
At this very moment, all around the world, people are experiencing all kinds of weather. People are also experiencing climate, which is related to the weather, but there's an important difference. That difference is really just a matter of time. Weather happens day to day, even hour to hour, and is still pretty unpredictable. Climate happens over longer periods of time, 30 years and longer, and is usually predictable. In a nutshell, climate can be described as the average weather over time. Here's how climate works. When energy from the sun interacts with the atmosphere, oceans, land, ice, clouds, and living things on Earth, it creates the climate. These interactions are complex, and they don't happen the same way all over the planet. That's why different parts of the Earth have different climates. For example, many parts of Utah have warm, dry summers and cold, mostly sunny winters with a few big snowstorms. Meanwhile, a place like Thailand is hot and humid year-round with periods of heavy rain called monsoons.
So what we just heard about is that weather happens day to day. Some days in Indiana, it is rainy. Some days in Indiana, it's really hot. Some days in Indiana, it's cold and snowy. We have different types of weather, but climate is showing a pattern of what your weather is like. So you have lived in Indiana for lots of years now. And every year you experience the same types of weather. We have winter, we have spring, we have summer, we have fall. It's a pattern that happens every year. Well, there are other places, even in our own country, that have different weather than we do. Their climate is different. There might be places in our country that are warm almost all year long, and they never have snow and cold like we do. So climate is talking about weather over long periods of time and looking at the patterns of weather that happen. Yes, Maberly. What do you know about the climate in California? It doesn't snow, or if it does, it's very rare. So the climate, the pattern of weather in California is very different than our climate here, right? So there are other regions. Regions is a word that talks about a place. There are other regions that have different climate than what we know. Yes, Kaylee. We're going to get in that together. On our task, we're going to start today by watching a video about what we're going to do. Today, we are going to identify the major climate regions of the United States and explain their characteristics. Need to see bodies that are focused, ready for listening. There's a lot of moving around and making sounds. We're going to be focusing on identifying these regions and explaining what it is like in that region. Okay. Here we have a text today that's going to describe different types of climates. different types of climates. We're going to review these regions, and we're going to review from yesterday. Yesterday we read about what causes a warm climate. Today we're going to review these together. So let's look at this text. It shows a picture of the earth, and then it shows some different regions. You see these regions? There's a blue region, pink, red, pink, blue. Let's talk about what these regions are. It says the average weather in polar regions is cold and dry. So polar regions, let me draw on our page here. Polar regions are cold and dry. And here's a picture of what a polar region might look like. Look on this map. I noticed that there are polar regions at the top of the globe and the bottom of the globe. So on the earth, there are polar climates where it is cold and dry. That's the pattern of weather in a polar region. When you hear the word polar, you might be thinking of something like a polar bear. We know the polar bear gets its name because it lives in regions like this, okay? Let's read about a different type of region. The next type says the temperate regions have mild weather with warm summers and cool winters. Think about where we live. We have warm summers and cool winters. So we live in a region that's called temperate. A temperate one, there's not a picture over here, but look at where it is on the map. Look at these pink regions right here on the map. If you live in these areas, you're going to have warm summers and cold winters. Looking at friends that are not being focused. A third type of region, let's read about it. It says the tropical region. The tropical region is hot and wet almost year round. A tropical region is this red area on the map. These places are hot and rainy almost all year. That's the pattern of weather. And take a look at the pictures. A rainforest is an example of a place in a tropic region where it's hot and rainy. That sounds different than where I live. It is not hot and rainy all year long here. I know that I have warm summers, but then it gets very cold in the winter. So we do not live in a tropic area. We live in the temperate regions because we have the 4 seasons, okay? Today, we're going to explore these different types of regions. You already know a little bit about polar, desert, rainforests. You already know about some of these places. So today we're going to use Google Maps to explore them and explain, well, what are these regions like? What is the ground like there? What type of plants are there? What is the weather like there? Who lives there, right? We're going to explore these regions today. First thing, we're going to watch an example from Mrs. Sousa of what we're going to do today. So we're going to focus our attention and watch an example, and then we get to do one together. We'll do one together before you start working on your own. Okay? So now that we know some about regions, let's see what our task is today.
Today, we're going to take a look at the different climate regions using Google Earth. As you know, our standard is going to focus on the United States, but we'll quickly take a look around the world to see how visible climate regions are. Just looking at the United States, we can see a very clear difference between the western half and the eastern half. The closer east we get, we see more and more green. The green gets darker as we get closer to the water. Moving to the left on the western half, we see some of the same. Closer to the water, there are many green areas, but in the middle, we see large, vast brown. This is indicative of the fact that we have some desert region space inside of the United States. Over here, we see more of a temperate climate. This is going to be where rainfall can be steady throughout the year and temperatures are more mild. As we zoom back out, we can see some tropic regions as well. There are small parts of Florida which are considered tropic, as well as islands right off the coast which are not part of the United States, but are a great example of the tropical regions by looking at their coloration. If we want to see an Arctic climate inside of the United States, we have to travel all the way up here. It's actually connected to Canada, and it's called Alaska. When we look for Arctic regions, we're going to notice much cooler weather, so the map will show us white areas to represent snow and ice that has formed on the land inside of that region. Today, you're going to use Google Earth to locate 4 different areas within the United States that highlight different characteristics of the climate region. To take a look at a few examples, let's zoom in and see what we can notice about our home state of Indiana. As you notice, looking out, we can see that this has green regions. So that's already a good indication to us about the vegetation. We're definitely going to be finding some plant life here in Indiana. As we zoom even closer, we can see that the coloration begins to break apart. There are areas of denser green, which is indicative of the fact that we'll have more plant life than areas that are broken apart because of city living or different types of land. So overall, the color of this area is green. There's a good amount of plant life. Vegetation, as I zoom in, appears to be trees. I also notice in areas that there is lots of grass, and I'm seeing farming regions telling me that there can be crops that can be grown for food to eat inside of this area as well. The coloration also tells me about the weather. If I'm going to see green and I'm going to see many plants in an area, and I'm also going to see farming locations in that region, that tells me that this region must get rain in order to keep those plants alive with water. When I look at the ground, I don't notice any frozen areas that would be indicative of an Arctic region. I notice there's dirt and soil. I also see that there are trees. I can also notice that there are areas and sections of water, meaning that it rains enough for bodies of water to remain filled, such as lakes. And if we zoom out, we can even find some rivers around the Indiana area. South of Indiana, as we approach our lower border, you will notice that our border is actually formed by a large river. That river is called the Ohio River, and we can follow it all around the southern border of our state. This river provides water for the vegetation and also serves to prove that we live in an area that has enough rain to keep this water flowing. So you will notice that there are many different qualities that give you clues about the climate region that you are observing or that you are living in. Indiana is what we would call a temperate region. Today, you will be given 4 different locations inside of the United States, and you will be observing the vegetation, the plant life that you see, The coloration. What is the color of the area? What do you notice as you zoom in and take closer looks? Are there certain areas that appear to have plant life, and next to it, there's areas that appear to have dirt? Or, like Indiana, is it majority covered by green plants? As you look at Arctic regions, do you notice of the quality of land? What do you see?
No.
You will be recording your observations today.
Awesome. So we have just heard an example from Mrs. Sousa of what we're going to do today. Let's get into opening our task, and we're going to do an example one together before you start working on your own today. Please open your task called Characteristics of Climate Regions. Okay, we know that today our success criteria is, can we identify major climate regions of the United States and explain their characteristics, just like Ms. Sousa did. She talked about what she saw using Google Maps. Let's go to slide 2. We're going to do this one together. This says, with your teacher, we are going to explore a tropical climate region. I remember reading this morning that tropical regions are warm and rainy almost all year long. That is the pattern of weather. So an example of a tropical region in the United States is called Hana, Hawaii. We're going to click the link to Google Earth, and we're going to explore the area for about 2 minutes. Then we'll come back together and we will talk about the vegetation we see, what colors we see, and the quality of the land. What do you notice as we explore Hana, Hawaii? Go ahead and click the Google Earth link to open it up. Google Earth will load and it will take us to this example of a tropical region in the United States. Okay, we are now looking at a tropic region, thinking about a tropic climate. Tropic areas are warm and rainy almost all year long. So let's go ahead and start exploring. I want to know, what are we noticing about this tropical area? Angela, go wash your hands. What are we noticing? What can we identify about this area as you start to zoom in? What do you see, Nick? A lot of green. So on our seesaw, I notice that there's lots of green. Our coloration, the colors we notice, lots of green. So I'm going to take some notes here on my seesaw task as I go between my seesaw task and Google Earth. I'm going to go back and forth to take some notes as we go. Who else has identified something you see? Dave. There's lots of towns, okay? So on the ground, we could take that note. Okay, so we see towns and homes. Towns, comma, homes. Okay, that means there are people who live there. There's lots of people who live in this tropical region. You might infer that people like to live in a place that is warm. People like to live in tropical regions because it's warm all year long. That's a good thing for lots of people. Alicia, what do you observe?
I see a lot of towns.
You see hills. Okay, so the ground is not flat in this region. There are hills or little mountains. So let's go back and take our notes. What do we see on the ground? Let's do that for quality of land. Let's say we see hills. We see hills. Whoops. So on the ground, we see hills, we see towns and homes. We notice the colors, lots of green. What else can we identify about the climate region of a tropical region? Kaylee, what do you notice? I'm sorry, I can't hear Kaylee when other people are tapping, Kellen. Shh. Go ahead, Kaylee. Oh, there's water there. So what exactly are you noticing? Are you noticing like the ocean next to it? Okay, so it's by the water. So that's some coloration we might notice. We see blue. There's blue water. When I look at the map, I see lots of green, but I also see blue. They're next to the water. Remember, a tropical region is warm and wet almost all year long. So when you live next to water, there's more water that goes up into the air, into the atmosphere. You guys know a little bit about our water cycle, right? Yeah. Water goes into the air, then it fills the clouds. The clouds become heavy and it rains back down to the earth. So when you live next to water, the water cycle just has a lot more water in it. This is totally different than a desert area where there's no water, right? Totally different. A tropical region is very moist. There's lots of water in the air, which is why it rains a lot of the time. Okay, so we notice some green, we notice blue. The quality of the land. It says, what do you see on the ground? Ice, soil, dust, sand, grass, water. Let's talk more about the quality of land. I want you to zoom in a little bit. Do you see any ice? Do you see grass? Do you see dust or soil? What type of things do you see on the ground? Gloria. You see what? Where do you see ice? Okay, so what you're noticing here probably is Gloria, is probably clouds, because we know in a tropical area it's warm, so there wouldn't be ice, but that does seem confusing. Gloria is pointing out this white stuff, and she thought it was ice, and that's okay. But we're also taking a picture from far, far away, so it is capturing some clouds, okay? There is no ice in this area. It will look different when we look at an Arctic region. It will look very different. Yes, Nick? There's some beaches. There's some beaches. So what type of things are on the ground at beaches? People. What type of things are on the ground? Like sand. Oh, so when we go to a beach, we know we have sand. And what? We've got, and what? What? Rocks and sand. And ground. So on the beach, there's sand, rocks. Okay. Now, I agree that there's some beaches there if they're right by the ocean. But I'm curious, when I look at my Google Earth image, does this whole area look like it has sand? No. We said it's mostly green. So what else is here? What is here, Angela? Grass. There's probably grass. What else is here, Alicia? Trees. Trees. So vegetation says what plant life? What plant life do you notice? We notice lots of trees and grass. Let's add that. Trees grass. So we have just done an example together. We have identified vegetation, which is about plants. We have identified the colors we see. Blue for water, green for plants. And we've talked about the quality of the land. We know there's hills in this tropical region. There's sand and rocks by the water. And there's towns and homes. People like to live in tropical regions. Take 1 minute to finish typing anything you notice about this tropical region. 1 minute to finish exploring this tropical region and typing. Sorry about that. Okay, with your group today, you're going to have about 5 minutes to explore a different type of region. We just did a tropical region where it is warm and wet all year long. This is a different type of region, a different climate. This climate is called the temperate. Can you say temperate? Temperate. Temperate is the climate that we live in Indiana. Remember on the map, there was a big temperate area. Temperate regions have warm summers and cold winters. Warm summers and cold winters. Mrs. Sousa has chosen an example of a place in a temperate region. We know Indiana is temperate, but we just explored Indiana with Mrs. Sousa, so she chose another place called Adams, Tennessee. Your job is to click the Google Earth. It will take you to an example of a temperate region, and you can explore the region with your group. I want you to explore and fill in. I want you to fill in at least 2 things for each category that you notice. What do you notice about the plants? What do you notice about the colors? What do you notice about the quality of land? You have 5 minutes to explore this temperate region and record 6 things that you notice. Your time begins now. Okay, today for your independent work during reading time, you have 2 more regions to explore. On slide number 4, it shows you an Arctic region. You're going to follow the same steps of exploring the Arctic region using the link on Google Earth, and you're going to take notes. I would like for you to record 2 things in each section, just like earlier. Then when you're done with slide number 4, on slide number 5, you're going to explore a desert region. The desert region is an example of a place called the National Wildlife Refuge in Arizona. That is a different climate in our country. I want you to explore and record your 2 things in each section. That is your work for today.